Good morning, good evening, whatever time you're listening. Welcome to a very special, what would I call this? A kind of supplemental episode to the Practical People. This one's for the Patreon, so it won't be on the normal YouTube. But I have a special guest with me today. I actually am producing my own feature film, The Quantum Terror, and I got my friend Heather Lowe to build my miniatures for me. Heather has never done miniatures for movies before, but she is quite creative with dolls and building doll houses, building a lot of kind of that fun craft stuff that you see people doing on YouTube. So, hi Heather, how are you doing?
Good.
So, I think this is Heather's first interview. Is this your first interview? Have you ever been interviewed before? I thought you got it. Didn't you get interviewed at like some, like they locked you in a theater with a bunch of bad movies and then they interviewed you after a couple of days to see how you held up or something?
I did. It's on the, if I'm right, it's on the extras for the movie Prison a Go-Go. My friend Kevin and I think, are on that. I look really haggard. I'm wearing the Screaming Jay Hawkins shirt, and I hadn't slept in some time.
So they like...
I think they were asking about low-budget films and why I enjoyed watching them so much. So that was, I forgot about that. This will be my second interview.
Heather's in a remote location, so her Skype slows down sometimes, so there may be a little bit of dragging, but anyway, yeah, so what is it? They locked you in a theater and they just played like really low-budget movies all weekend long, right?
Yeah, I think we went in on a Friday night. It was in Hollywood, and we stayed till Sunday. And it's just movies 24 hours a day. We slept in the theater. It was an old theater. Very hard to try to sleep in those seats. It was freezing cold. And they played a lot of, they played a couple new ones, a lot of old ones that were cool. And it was just fun. You know, it's basically like a bunch of people, excuse my cat, Mystery Science Theater 3000 style. You know, people were just kind of yelling stuff at the screen. So it was tons of fun.
So I came to the right person for building miniatures for my micro budget movie. So I think, like I said, we start the Practical People with a current event, and I just saw, and I know this is kind of near and dear to your heart, you're a huge Hellboy fan, and they just announced that they are rebooting Hellboy. They're not giving us the Hellboy 3 that fans have been asking for years on end, and that Ron Perlman was literally petitioning for. They turned that down, and they're just going to reboot it. And I know you have feelings about this.
I have feelings. You know, typically when people remake things, you know, any movie like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I always say, you know what, let's just pretend they're two different movies completely. We don't need to compare them. They're two different versions. This is not that case. I think Ron Perlman is such an amazing actor. And, you know, like I had said before, you can do anything with makeup. I'm sure we can make anyone look like Ron Perlman in Hellboy makeup, but that voice, you'll never be able to replicate, and no one will ever buy into, I think, another Hellboy. And plus, you know, they've been petitioning forever to get a Hellboy 3. So at this point, you know, I don't want to see it without Ron Perlman.
I saw people comment that, and this is something that I feel kind of strongly about as well. I saw people comment, well, the movies aren't quite like the comic, and they should reboot it and make it more like the comic. But I'm a huge comic book fan, and Mike Mignola, who created Hellboy, is a wonderful artist. I really love his art. But I could never actually get into the Hellboy comics all that much. The movies were what really grabbed me, and I think it was the addition of Guillermo del Toro's voice and Ron Perlman's acting and Doug Jones and the rest of the cast. I think it was their additions to Mike Mignola's vision that really kind of completed it for me. So in my mind, I don't want to see a different Hellboy. I want to, you know, like I said, I feel like it was left suggested in part 2 that there was going to be a part 3, And I feel like
Yeah.
making it a trilogy would just be so much more satisfying. And they only made it what I mean, the first one was about 12 years ago, I think. Maybe not
Maybe.
even that. And then there was a sequel, and everybody was fantastic. I really liked the cast. um and I'm blocking on the name of the fire starter girl, but the actress that played her actually kind of reminds me of you. I always look at her and go, yeah, Heather. Yeah, I mean, maybe if they reboot it and then they cast you, but
Oh, sure.
and then they bring Ron Perlman
Yeah,
back.
me and Hellboy could be a couple. It'd be great. Kitten sprawl.
And I just have to comment that you have two daughters, and one of your daughters made her own Hellboy comic where he fought Macaroni Man. Was that it?
Evil Macaroni Man. He is not someone you mess with. We have a actual and I have the original comic. She was 5 years old maybe when she made it, and I think you had told me about Free Comic Book Day, and we went to a comic book store, and she marched right up to the owner and told her that she had made this Hellboy versus Evil Macaroni Man, and she thought it was so great. She told my daughter if she had went and brought the comic to her that she might put it up in her store, and so she gave her a bunch of free comics, and it was exciting. Evil Macaroni Man is always around our house.
That's awesome. So, okay, so note to the people, if anyone's listening that's in charge of rebooting Hellboy, Evil Macaroni Man is got to be on the table at the very least for
Yeah.
consideration for adversaries. So,
It's not as cheesy as it sounds, guys. He's
I
evil.
see what you did there.
Mm.
Cheesy macaroni.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to what you do. Now, you and I, at the time of the making of the Quantum Terror, lived nearby, and we've known each other for years. I think I met you when you were 16, 17 years old. So we've been
15, I think.
really.
15. I
Uh,
think that's probably about it. Yeah. Hmm.
so we've known each other for a really long time, and when I started on the Quantum Terror, I don't think I was. I don't. I don't know, it probably was in my head that I wanted to involve you somehow because I knew that you were really good at that stuff. But I think I was planning to build the miniatures myself at that point, and I was going to try building them out of cardboard. And maybe I didn't want to bother you with it or something like that. But I started building stuff out of cardboard and painting it, and it looked all right. But the cardboard started to warp and buckle under the paint, and I realized that yes, I could probably build some miniatures, but I was already spreading myself too thin with other stuff, and I knew that if I came to you, I knew that you were just going to do a better job because you're so good with, you pretty much do everything. You refinish furniture, you build doll houses, you've made little like freak show figurines. I mean, you just kind of always been. I don't know. How would you describe it? You've just always been kind of like you're an artist, but also, and you do draw and paint as well. But you always kind of find those kind of different crafts and builds and put things together. So I don't
I
know.
like to tinker.
What's that?
I like to tinker. I think that's it. I like to tinker. I like to try a little of everything, see if it's possible. I tinker with things. I think that's what I would say about that.
Well,
Um,
I mean, you played with Sculpey. You actually, I forgot you made a puppet for the Quantum Terror as well. There's he kind of, what you and Jenna Green and myself, it was almost like a knitting circle. We had a day where we just drank coffee and made puppets out of Sculpey and kind of chatted. And yeah, you made. Was that your first time working with Sculpey? Because
it was. Now I do it all the time. You guys taught me about Sculpey, and I always use it now for everything.
I'm looking for yeah, because that puppet, we did shoot that puppy. We put it in a tank underwater, so it kind of floated and it had like tendrily things, and you did a really great job with it. It was I don't know, it kind of looked like a cross between a fetus and an ant and one of those things, one of those pilots from Dune, one of those trades guild pilots, whatever you call them. Anyway, people will see when they see the Quantum Terror, but you contributed that as well, and I just kind of want to get an idea of, like, I come to you kind of, I wouldn't say freaking out, but just exhausted, going like,
Yes.
I need you to make, I need help with these tunnels, and you made 1/4 scale replicas of my tunnel sets, and they were magnificent. And what was that kind of process for you? What did
That was just loads of fun. Um, part of it, making these things, I just like to see if I can, and making them out of inexpensive material, I think is really the majority of the fun of making anything. Um, but to see, making them from sets that you built and then trying to replicate it, it was just loads of fun. I tried a couple different things to see if they worked. We started the cardboard route, and then, I go to wood, and then, I think eventually it was like cement board, and then we tried different spray paints and such. And it was really fun seeing what you had built and then replicating that in small versions. Um, I don't know. I love doing it. It was loads of fun. I was super stoked for the opportunity. I think I sent you a bunch of text messages of funny pictures as I was playing with them because I'm a big kid, and I was like, "Yay, tunnels! Let's throw some monsters down there."
Well, I remember getting one picture that was this really cool looking tunnel, and then there was a Barbie doll down the tunnel, and it looked like she was getting attacked by like fisherman lure rubber worms or something like that.
Yeah,
and
it was fish bait.
So, and it was like Barbie captioned Barbie's demise, or Barbie died down there, or something like that. And I mean, I had a lot of fun. When I got them back, it was so much fun because I shot them with a wide lens so that I could keep the picture as sharp as possible, and they really translated. I mean, you cannot tell, and your miniatures feature very heavily in the movie. Pretty much any shot of the tunnels that the actors are not in is your miniatures, and all of our creatures, all of our giant monsters that slither their way down the tunnels. We couldn't afford any actual size giant monsters. It was all miniatures. So I mean, they play a really big role in the movie, and I just remember, you asking me to send you photo reference, and me taking a bunch of photos, and when I got them back, everything, they were, concrete tunnels are kind of built in blocks. So when you see the tunnels in my movie, the way I set up the set, it looks like concrete panels, and that's because they do actually drop it. They pre-pour a lot of those concrete panels in blocks, so there's kind of like slats in between them, and you replicated those slats, and then I built a set tunnel. It's an optical trick where I actually built a tunnel out of styrofoam that was meant to be a tunnel that the characters climb down, and I laid it on the floor because I didn't have enough. I couldn't create something that the actors could actually climb down, so I laid it on the floor, turned the camera upside down, and then had the actors pretend that they were climbing when they were actually just laying on the floor. And then you built a replica out of the concrete board, and you got that pretty precise. And then Jenna created a monster that was supposed to be after them coming down that concrete board, or concrete tunnel. So we put that in there, and it just kind of all came together. And I've shown a few shots to some professionals, and they were like, "Yeah, it's pretty seamless." So is that now that you've done that, do you feel like you can like go like the next level, and like what would you want to create in miniature next?
I would make the entire world miniatures if I could. I love miniatures. I loved making, the dark tunnels and stuff. It was neat to try to replicate, the little colors and the little marks in the tunnels. I don't know what I would go for next. Currently, I'm making an Alice in Wonderland house. That's been interesting. So I'm going like that route right now.
Is that a
I don't.
dollhouse, or is that because I saw you were also building some like furniture, right? You were finding
Yeah.
things like what did there was a what did that look like? Like one of those like cable reels or something like that. That
I found it outside, like rotting. This is me. I am one of those people who I love themes. I love themed rooms, and now that I always had my living room once looked like the Jungle Cruise at Disneyland. Now that I have kids, everything's themed. I homeschool. My classroom is entirely Hogwarts. My youngest daughter wanted an Alice in Wonderland room. So challenge accepted. This is my fun. I have a little dollhouse. So I'm thatching the roof and making it into the rabbit's house. And I found outside a really heavy, kind of rotted out stump. And someone had screwed in one of those cable spool tops to it. It was pretty hideous, but on the outside, I thought, well, the stump part of it kind of looks like a fungusy mushroom. So I made it into a side table. I cleaned it up and I made it into a side table. That's a mushroom. And then I sculpey, thank you for the sculpey skills. I made a little caterpillar and I put him on top. So we're slowly converting it. Right now, I've got the dollhouse portion of it and slowly doing the room. That's where I find it's the most fun for me. I think growing up in Southern California, we're all kind of Disneyland kids down there, and every time I'd go to an attraction, I was like poking the rocks, trying to be like, what is that made out of, and trying to see behind the scenes and reaching my hand out, trying to touch, leaves and stuff. I loved how they could completely transform an entire world. Like literally, it seemed overnight. And I go, well, why can't I replicate that in my house? Do I need to have all this expensive equipment and material? And so I do that. That's what I do. That's my fun. I like decorating my house. I like to go to another world without leaving my house.
we'll
That
have
might
to
be the
find
introvert me, but
we'll have to find a way to get to that at Disney World. Like I'm not even a fan of Avatar, but I would still love to go to Disney World and see that new, like they turned part of Disney World into Pandora with all the
oh yes.
crazy rock formations and waterfalls and trees and that sort of thing. Like I said, I love that idea of kind of creating attractions where you can immerse yourself in a world. I remember it was like Universal Studios, there was an E.T. ride for a while.
Oh yes.
And the ride itself was kind of goofy, but the I was actually most impressed when you waited online. You were in the forest, and it was like a hot summer day, and then you go into this building to wait online, and suddenly you're in like this pine wood forest with these giant trees, and the way that they made the trees go up into the dark, it looked like, and they put stars in the sky, and it looked like you felt like you were standing it was just an air conditioned room, but you felt like you were standing in a forest at night. And I was actually disappointed in the ride in comparison to how cool the wait online was, because I felt totally immersed in that world.
And that's what you remember, whether it be, any of the rides of the pirate ride. I mean, you're waiting there in line and you're perfectly happy waiting. Indiana Jones, perfectly happy standing in line for 45 minutes in tunnels. And, they get that happiness. They have sights, they have smells, they have everything is completely immersing you in this world. And for me, I mean, I could care less about going on half the rides. The Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. I'm a little bit of a baby. I was absolutely terrified of going on that ride, but I was so happy to stand in line and check out every little cobweb in that place. Those people have the best jobs ever, and you know what? I'm just gonna turn my house into that if possible.
I'll have to find it. I worked for a while, and I'm blocking on his name at the moment, but he was a really nice guy. He actually was responsible for designing the Indiana Jones ride, like everything that you saw when you waited online. I don't know what you call that, but not for California, but there was the Asian Disneyland.
Oh wow.
Because I guess I think there's Disneyland France, and there's Disneyland and Disney World here, and then there's like Disneyland Japan, but I think there was like a Disneyland in some other part of Asia, and I can't remember which country or what, but I'll have to go back and look him up because it's been many years since I worked with him. But he showed me drawings. I mean, it's as extensive as designing something for a movie. I mean, he designed the layout and the path, what the path would look like, and all the little stone idols, because it was different. Because in California, you go through and it's kind of like a I think it's kind of like a East Indian looking archaeological dig, and I think it was more Asian. I mean Indian is Asian, but it was more kind of like what something like a dig in China or Singapore would look like. So he did it a bit differently. But anyway, getting back to what you do, I mean, it's just a lot of fun seeing you do all this stuff. Now, one other thing that I think is worth noting is for a while you were doing these chalk drawings, and you would dress your kids up and have them lay down next to the chalk and kind of like pose, like kind of like a pageant of the masters type thing. These different scenes, these Disney scenes, and all this different stuff. You did Harry Potter. You had them like pretend they were flying on a broom, and you did Rapunzel, and you did I can't remember all the stuff you did, but I wrote an article about it for a movie pilot, and that took off. And then you entered like a George Takei contest, and I think you came in like second place or something.
I don't know thinking about places. I was in the runner-up though. Out of all the thousands of submissions, I was in the top. I don't know how many there were, 10, something like that.
That was Sweeney Todd, right? You had them dressed as
Sweeney Todd, which got parents, but
what? Say that again.
My kids are down with the musicals. A lot of the parents, some people thought it was cool. Some people didn't think it was so cool. I thought the comments were funny. We had tons of fun with the Sweeney Todd thing. Everyone thought I have 2 girls. One of them dressed up as the Johnny Depp version of, Benjamin Barker. And I gave her a little fake straight razor. And my other daughter was Mrs. Lovett. And it was funny. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, people got a little uptight about that. The straight razor was like made out of cardboard and tinfoil or something like that. It
was literally cardstock and tinfoil, yeah. And the rest of the stuff were just like rags we had found around the house. We had an old Halloween costume. I made a little hat out of like a paper plate and felt. I mean, we would always when I did the chalk drawings, I think it started off. I did a haunted mansion one. My favorite picture is the stretching one with a little, like she looks like a ballerina and she's on the tightrope above the alligator. I did that with my kids, a huge scene, and had them lie down on it. And, we were just kind of going through all this like rags and stuff we had around the house and see what we could do to make a costume. And it just kind of became really fun for us to basically make something out of nothing. Paper plates, cardstock. I mean, funny little props. We were finding anything we could, little bits of makeup left over. We did dolls, circus things. We did a Doctor Who one. I mean, we did all kinds of stuff. We made boats out of cardboard and painted them to look like wood. And it became a game. What could we make out of literally scraps and trash and nothing? And I think you probably understand you're the only other person I know that saves recyclable for hopes that you're going to use them one day because they look really cool and you're like, I'm going to use that on something. And we did. We had whole drawers of things to recycle.
I do that all the time. Matter of fact, I feel kind of sad because we're moving at the moment and I didn't want to move all of it, so I threw a bunch of it out. But even then it was hard. It was going like, oh, I know I'm going to throw this out, and then next week I'm going to think of just the thing that I could have used this for. But I just went and did it, with taking it on faith that I will come across more junk that I can save and then use as something else. But yeah, I mean, it's like I've made sci-fi weapons out of like Nestle Quick tubs, and it's
so satisfying too. It's so satisfying to take something so normal and everyday and to make it into something so amazing. I think that's just so much fun.
Well, they've done it in big budget movies too. I'll never forget, the motion tracker device in the original Alien. They like took a part of a telephone and they glued an ice cube tray to it. And they painted it, and there's like stuff on the wall. If you look really close, it's like kind of like a retro coffee maker and all this sort of thing. And yeah, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes if I'm watching a movie and I recognize what they used, like I feel even happier about it. It's almost better that way. It's like I've made spaceships and sci-fi buildings out of like Gatorade bottles and Infamil tubs, and those shampoo bottles that have weird shapes to them, or there's an energy drink that kind of the bottle looks like it could be a fuselage, and I enjoy recognizing.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
It is. I think that was one of the comments I had made when we used to go to the festivals. We'd watch stuff, like The Stuff, which is such a funny movie. But all these movies, most people go, oh, that's so cheesy. That doesn't look like the real thing at all. But, in my mind, when I see these big, huge CGI movies, I don't understand how that stuff's made. And so it doesn't even register to me as effort, if that makes sense. But when I see these low budget movies, there's something really appealing about the fact that you're trying to convince an audience of the authenticity of half the stuff in there, and it's just the creativeness of it. I like to see how much effort and how much imagination went into creating the environment in these stories, and that's just very, very appealing to me. And I do watch things with complete wondering how I can make these things, and I imagine that's how it used to be a long time ago when you see like Harryhausen or like Doctor Who, the old ones. You're like, that alien's made of bubble wrap. Yes, I can make that too. And that's really exciting.
And that's another thing. And I know that the CGI people do put a tremendous amount of effort into what they do. Rigging the bone structure and the muscles and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's like you don't have to kind of strive to find what you need. Whatever it is, you sculpt it in there, and what you sculpt is kind of contingent on your ability to sculpt. But there's a ton of people working on it and a ton of money behind it, and that's one of the kind of the satisfying things about low budget filmmaking, is kind of taking just things that are around and turning them into the solution to your filmmaking conundrum, whatever it may be. But yeah, just taking styrofoam or bits of board and turning it into tunnels and having you do miniature versions of them and having them match up completely, is very satisfactory. And I kind of, again, it's like I've said before, like finding the artist's fingerprints in the work. Sometimes it doesn't need to look the most realistic. I don't think a movie like Reanimator would have its charm if the cat was CGI and looked ultra realistic. The fact that it's like a stuffed cat on a stick, with someone kind of like bobbing it up and down underneath the camera, it like added to the charm. And I don't think that all these movies now are all focusing on realism so much that we kind of lost some of the fun in them, that the spirit of what made them so good to begin with. I don't think anybody who was watching them at the time was looking for ultra realism. So
and sometimes for me, I think things. I know I do with everything I make, whether it be refurbishing a piece of furniture, redoing a room, making something to wear. I really like flawed items. I love antiques. I will almost never buy anything that's pristine. I don't like it. I like character, and so I don't like things too clean. I like things really, you can see that things were worked on really hard, and they look a little grungy, an old cat on a stick. Like I like that,
I like recreating rust. As a matter of fact, the last few miniature robots I built out of junk, like the paint job I gave them was very rusty, and I actually found some silver leaf and I did some quick dry brush of the glue over the rust, and then I stuck the silver leaf on it and pulled it off, and it just got like remnants of the silver leaf, but it looked like maybe this rusty robot had like run into something and gouged its rust off and revealed like a little bit of silver. But yeah, it's like usually if something looks too good in a movie, I'll instantly start like throwing dirt on it or rubbing pastel on it or charcoal or something like that to dirty it down, because I think that's kind of, I mean, it's cliche to say now, but like Alien in the original Star Wars, they call it like the used future look. And yeah, it's like when you go to a construction site, none of the construction equipment looks pristine and clean.
No, it has to look used.
And even
otherwise,
I mean the military keeps their stuff nice, obviously, but it's still.
I still expect some scratches and dings in it.
Yeah, it looks oily and it looks, this.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So, there's some of the joy in that, and I'm glad that movies now are kind of making a return to practical. I've been hearing stories about how certain movies sequels are going to have more practical effects because the last one that came out, it was a success, but everyone complained it was all computer graphics, and you just kind of, I don't know.
I mean, there's definitely a place for that. Absolutely, there's a place for the computer graphics. I mean, obviously, you watch The Walking Dead, you really can't have a tiger, like, hanging out, jumping on people. But, I think that there has to be, like, a good medium between them. You can't have too much of something that you can't really touch. And some actors are brilliant, and they can do anything, and other ones have a hard time acting in front of tennis balls. I've noticed.
I absolutely agree, and I enjoy the green screen stuff as well. I love the idea that you can set up a green screen and then but for me it's I'm gonna put my handmade miniatures in behind the actors and make them look really big. But no, I absolutely agree with you, and I think that the CGI, it's just when it's all CGI, it just kind of, it all feels the same. There's nothing, like, no matter how spectacular they make it, it all kind of feels a little bit homogenous. And, so if you throw in the practical with the CGI, it kind of gets a rhythm going, and it kind of breaks things up. But I was going to ask you, going back to indie filmmaking, though, so if somebody else, I mean, I know I can always call you up, but if people wanted to start calling you up that saw your work in the Quantum Terror after it comes out and said, hey, can you make something for us? I mean, is that something that you want to try and do? I know right now you're in Montana, but,
I live out in the middle of Montana. There's not a lot around us. If they can work with, the location logistics of it, I would love to do stuff. Absolutely. I don't consider myself an expert at making any of this stuff. I barely consider myself an artist. I just like to, as I call it, tinker with things. I would love to make stuff, and I love the challenge of trying to make things inexpensively, especially. I would absolutely love to do stuff. Like I said, if they can work with the fact that I live out here.
I think it's something, just talking to other creators. I mean, a lot of them, yes, there are a lot of professionals out there, but I don't think a lot of them are thinking of themselves as, whatever it is, I know how to do it. I think even the big professionals take each assignment on as a challenge. I've never done this before, but I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's been your biggest strength, is everything that I've thrown your way, or everything you've decided you want to do, has been a process of you figuring it out, and that's on the budget, and I think that's your strength. That's what's impressed me about you, and that's why I wanted you to help me with my movie, because I had an idea what I wanted in my head, and I had an idea about how I was going to do it, but I was so kind of preoccupied with all the other aspects of making the film, and when what I tried wasn't working out, it's like, yeah, I knew I could spend more time and more money, but I knew I was just better served by handing it over to you, and A, that you would be able to figure it out, and B, because it was you doing it and not me, that was I think that brought a little more creative diversity to my movie. You did it in a way that wouldn't have thought to do it, and you did it in a way that was like inherently yours. So, it was very satisfying to me to have kind of it brought more to the film where it would have just kind of been more of the same for me. So, and I would encourage any independent filmmakers who hire anybody, especially on a low budget level, to, definitely keep an open mind to what the creative talent you bring on has to say about it. Don't have an idea so stuck in your mind that I have to have it this way, because I think you're hurting your creative talent, or you're closing your mind to possibilities that are available to you on your budget. I think wanting to have it a certain way and not having the money to do it that way kind of almost leads to like a poorly executed version of it. So that would be my message to anyone that hired you, is listen to Heather, listen to her suggestions. So anyway,
and you were very open to stuff, because I know it wasn't all just scaled down. I remember you were like, make me some mountain trains, and I was like, okay.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
So I
that.
went home and I thought about it, and I think it took me a few days, and I was like, I made mountains, I figured it out.
And you did it out
So
of spray foam, and you used, like, I handed you some materials. I handed you some gravel and some sand, and that I'd bought.
yeah, little rocks and stuff, and sometimes I feel like you want to make concrete. Sometimes use concrete. If you want to make mountains with sand and dirt and stuff, then use sand and dirt. So I think it worked out pretty well. But the mountains were loads of fun. My house was covered in foam forever.
And they looked really good too. I actually ended up shooting them twice, 2 different ways, for different results. And then I kind of had a thing where I stored it, because some of the rocks were hot glued together, and I stored it in my garage in the middle of summer in Texas, and it actually softened the hot glue and they fell off. And so I had to kind of like slap it back together, but it worked really well. I'd forgotten about that. And
and you basically just handed me like boards and a couple extra stuff, and you were like, here's some rocks, maybe make them look like that. And I was like, okay, I hope you like it.
And it was fun. And
so it was fun.
It was great. It was great receiving something that, again, I wasn't expecting, because it's like I'm discovering the movie too. I get to have some of the joy of getting something out of the movie that I'm not expecting to get, which is kind of the fun of watching a movie. You watch a movie and you don't know what's going to happen next, and that is part of the fun. I should also say that we kind of also, during the whole process, would share on Pinterest different things that we would find, and we wouldn't particularly use them, but they would just kind of keep the dialogue going. It didn't, I sent you, I think my favorite thing that I sent you was somebody had taken some, what was it? They did a miniature waterfall, and instead of pouring water from it, I forget what it was. It was like
salt, wasn't it? Like salt and flour?
Salt and flour, that's it. So they poured salt and flour down this miniature waterfall, and it made me wish that I had done a waterfall scene somewhere.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's one of those things you just can't stop staring at. It really looks like a waterfall. I wanted to just pour fake water on everything after that. I was like, flood the house. Let's get some salt and flour.
Well, it was fantastic because it really did look like, if you would have tried to pour water, it would have given away it would have broken the illusion, because it was not, you pour water down a miniature waterfall. Water has a certain texture and quality to it in small streams that it doesn't have in large streams, and pouring that salt and flour down that miniature waterfall made it look like the frothing, spraying, misting. You looked at it and you looked like if you stood right next to that, you would feel the mist of the waterfall kind of frothing and bubbling up all around you.
It was so convincing. And I saved it and I stared at it for a while. I have so many boards dedicated to just rad stuff people have made. And, you know, it's just the ingenuity of it is just really neat. I love that people can think of the stuff and,
Well, the
you know,
textures,
all utilize it.
yeah, it was it the I don't know. That's part of the fun too. Is just discovering materials. It's like I remember the fun of discovering that I could take eucalyptus leaves and glue them on a board and make them look like dragon scales.
Yeah.
And then not too long ago was I showed you. It wasn't friendly plastic. It was those sheets that you could dip in warm water and then
Hold them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And friendly plastic, Jenna introduced me to that, which was little plastic beads you put in hot water and you can mold them together. So, you know, it's just the fun of using all these materials and realizing that, you know, like you said, if something needs to be concrete, you can use concrete board, or maybe that's not what's called for. Maybe, you know, it's like some of the tunnel sets were styrofoam painted to look like
Sure.
concrete.
It's obviously been too heavy, so it worked out and surprisingly matched up, you know?
Yeah, no, it was great. You know, sometimes my actual full size sets were built out of styrofoam too, and there were sometimes that, you know, the actors would forget and try and lean against them, and the whole set would start to shake, and they'd be like, "Whoa, sorry, don't lean against that." It's like, yeah. So, and part of the reason I did that was because it's such a low budget movie. I didn't want to build a set that was not sturdy, and if something fell over and fell on an actor, you know, it would injure them. So I thought, well, if I build it out of styrofoam, yeah, it'll be flimsy, and I'll have to remind people not to breathe on it. But, you know, at least it'll be safe. So, anyway.
And we were able to use it too. So, you know, once you were done with the set, we were able to reuse pieces of it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, you know, really great.
I'm still reusing pieces of it. Actually, you know, take pieces of the set and kind of sand it down. And I'm actually building one more miniature for the Quantum Terror right now, which I wish you were here for. But I got it. It's cool. It's all right. It's just a quick shot. But anyway, so I think that's about, like I said, this is kind of an extra show for the Patreon people. Hi, Patreon people. Thank you for contributing. And so I'm going to wrap it up, but we usually do shout-outs at the end of the episode. So is there anybody you would like to give a shout-out to? I caught you off guard, sorry.
Yeah. Hello, people of the world and Patreon.
Well, I'm just going to do a shout out to the Patreon supporters who this particular episode is exclusively for them. Although it's been a really great interview, and I'm tempted to put it up on YouTube, but you know, I've got to give the Patreon supporters some exclusive content. I am going to post. If you can send me some photos of some of the stuff we've talked about, I'll post links to the movie pilot article where you did the chalk drawing, and I'd love to post. If you can send me some pictures, I'd love to post some photographs of what you're working on right now with your Alice in Wonderland stuff. So, well, thank you very much. So, to my Patreon listeners, whether it be morning or the evening, whatever time you're listening, thank you very much. This is Christopher Moonlight for the Practical People.